They only see us on the run. Let's do our living in the moonlight. Then we'll be living all the time. Hide away. They only see us on the run.
The first things Tucker and I ever made together were a cobra and a hyena mask for my son and daughter's preschool play. We worked with masking tape and aluminum foil. That was in 2013, and that was also the summer that I taught Tucker to knit. At the time, we had joked about making sock puppets, but enormous sock puppets, and rather than using old socks, knitting ourselves some enormous socks, like socks that would cover the children, and making them look like repurposed old socks made into puppets. And we were just going to do it as a joke, and it took us about 3 years, but we actually followed through and did the whole thing. I saw a call for art projects for an exhibit that was specifically for partnered projects. And Tucker and I wrote an abstract for a project about something that he had brought home, a concept he had brought home from one of his biology classes at Drexel University. And we were chosen for the show on the basis of that. And that's how we made the meta female, which wasn't a puppet, but really showed me how good Tuck could be at making three-dimensional objects. And with knitting, it was almost like he was sculpting them out of clay.
In metafemales, who occur in about 1 in 1,000 human women, the mosaic formed during development contains not just 2 X's but 3. Still, despite the extra X chromosome, only one of them can be expressed, and instead 2 must be inactivated. The triple X condition will go unnoticed in most cases, the syndrome being nearly symptomless. This project depicts genetic mosaicism in human females with triple X syndrome, or metafemale. In the knitted sculpture, the inactivated chromosomes are shown as hard, compact articles, like the beads and buttons, representing the suppressed potential. The expression of the active chromosomes are shown with knitted red and blue V's, like small messages in transit or arrowheads in flight. It was thought that I may have Asperger's at the time that I was a child, but this was not something that was confirmed until I became an adult. And in the time since then, it's become a significant part of my identity as well.
I had believed that Tucker had Asperger's syndrome from the first conversation that I had ever had with him in 2011. We went to an event called Neurodiversity Initiative in Washington, D.C., which had a number of speakers, including John Elder Robison. Tucker and I had both just read his memoir, Look Me in the Eye, and it had been hugely affecting for both of us. When John started to talk that day about the need for children to have adult autistic role models and was expressing the needs of the autistic community like it was a civil rights movement, and it had that energy and that sense of hopefulness and of history being made, I had grabbed whatever little note tablet they had given us for the day and wrote to Tucker, sitting next to me, "Puppets!" We were always on the lookout for making or helping other organizations make puppets or artifacts for their own processional events, or volunteering to be parts of those events. We would go out of state to do it if we could afford it. But we were both really sure we didn't want to get involved with making what we called social justice puppets in the name of autism.
The first costume I made for myself had a mask over my chest and a veil over my face. I found that having my face obscured created a communication barrier that stopped me from covering my face for several years in these contexts. Being involved in processional arts has been challenging also for sensory reasons, including textures, smells, and my lack of depth perception from partial blindness. These, and having difficulty understanding faces, have served as obstacles for me to overcome as an autistic artist seeking inclusion in these kinds of events.
We had decided to make a set of hand puppets for the 7 characters from the movie The Lion in Winter, which is one of my kids' very favorite movies. I had sewn all the sort of simple bodies from Antron fleece, and it was Tucker's job, because it was the harder job, to make the faces that identified the characters. And to do this, we would find photos online, um, still photos from the film The Lion in Winter, Peter O'Toole, Katharine Hepburn. We'd find pictures that we both liked and that we both felt really visually were good representations of the characters. But even though he would agree that they were good representations, he would then ask me, what is this expression? What does this facial expression mean? It was almost like he had been shown the picture and then had it whisked away from him so that he couldn't see it anymore, even though it was still right in front of him. I don't know what the term for this is or how this relates to autism, other than it's some component of face blindness. But I would have to say, well, in this picture of Eleanor, she's giving this look, it's clear that her feelings are hurt. It's clear that she's in a lot of pain, but it's still an angry, defiant sort of way. And she's not trying to hide how hurt she is. She really wants Henry to know. And if I said that, he'd say, "That great, got it," and he would be able to reproduce it. But if I didn't say that, he couldn't get it from the visual. He couldn't go from the visual to the visual. He had to go from visual to an oral explanation and then back to the visual.
Where my abilities ended, she was able to help, and we were able to work together to make something that was meaningful and evocative of a particular story. And ultimately, I feel like we were very successful, but because of our collaboration, that neither of us needed to do it alone. My skill set and her skill set were able to complement each other. Finding a solution to this challenge in our own home while working on puppets was certainly one thing, but ultimately we feel very strongly that the ability to overcome these kinds of challenges where different people have limitations and different people have their own skill sets is a benefit to everyone, and that there's a lot of meaningful artwork that could be produced if we allow for accommodations to be made that benefit the autistic populations and neurodivergent populations.
A giant puppet of Temple Grandin was not going to create the kind of connection we were looking to create. But we felt really strongly that autistic people having creative control over a procession or a puppet or a series of puppets artistically would be very meaningful. And I became very interested in the challenges that puppetry and processional arts held for autistic people or people with sensory processing disorders, because processional arts are community bonding events, and they're spiritual rituals, and they're political, and they're artistic, and to be left out of the participation and design of them for no reason other than that the structure that's been set up to accommodate neurotypical populations is to be left out of a huge part of the human experience. So I started to find autistic people who loved making puppets or large mobile sculptures and who were really good at it and who had festivals in their area that they wanted to participate in or had tried to participate in, but for whom it hadn't gone perfectly. For a lot of festivals, you had to sign up, but then you were also put into a group, and before you got to do the work on the thing you wanted to build, you had to do getting to know you exercises and trust exercises, and it certainly didn't take 100 autistic people to let me know that this would be off-putting enough to keep a lot of them away, that they didn't want to do a trust exercise, they wanted to get right to the puppet.